The fluorescent lights hummed above. The air hung heavy with the scent of cardboard and sweat. It was another day at Global One Logistics, and for Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron, another day meant another delivery route. The four friends, barely out of high school, found themselves thrown together in the daily grind of package delivery. Michael, the de facto leader of their little group, was saving for college, dreaming of escaping their small town. Andrew, quiet and observant, worked diligently, his mind always on a distant goal. Garrett, the jokester, used humor to mask a deep-seated fear of ending up stuck in a dead-end job. Aaron, the youngest, followed his friend's lead, eager to prove himself. The warehouse was a hive of activity. Forklifts zipped around like oversized wasps, their horns blaring. Conveyor belts groaned under the weight of countless packages. The air buzzed with a frenetic energy, a stark contrast to the monotony of the job. Each day blurred into the next, a cycle of loading, driving, delivering, and repeating. Yet beneath the surface of their ordinary lives, a current of unease was beginning to stir. The friends couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Their delivery routes often took them to unusual places, places shrouded in secrecy and whispers of something more. Little did they know their mundane existence was about to take a sharp turn into a world they never knew existed, a world hidden beneath the surface of their everyday lives. The packages they delivered held more than just goods. They held secrets, secrets that would lead them down a dangerous path. As they clocked in for another shift, the hands on the clock seemed to tick a little faster, counting down to a moment that would change their lives forever. The hum of the fluorescent lights took on a sinister tone, and the air, thick with the scent of cardboard and sweat, now carried a faint whiff of something else, something unknown, something unsettling. The day began like any other. Michael tossed a package to Andrew, who caught it with a grunt. "Another day, another dollar," Garrett quipped, adjusting his Global One cap. Aaron, ever the eager beaver, had already finished loading his truck and was bouncing on the balls of his feet. Their routes were familiar. Michael, with his knack for navigation, handled the sprawling suburbs. Andrew, meticulous and organized, took on the bustling downtown businesses. Garrett, always up for a challenge, tackled the winding roads leading to the more remote areas. And Aaron, eager to prove his worth, was assigned the seemingly straightforward task of deliveries to the nearby naval base. The naval base, a looming presence on the edge of town, had always been a source of intrigue for the friends. Surrounded by high fences and guarded gates, it seemed like a world apart. Aaron, in particular, was fascinated by the stories he'd heard about the base. Whispers of secret projects, advanced technology, and covert operations fueled his imagination. Today, as he drove through the gates, a shiver of excitement ran down his spine. He felt like he was stepping into one of his spy novels. The guard at the gate scrutinized Aaron's ID, his expression unreadable. "Delivery for Lieutenant Commander Jones," Aaron said, trying to sound nonchalant. The guard nodded curtly, the gate slowly groaning open. As Aaron drove onto the base, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The buildings were stark and imposing, the atmosphere heavy with an air of secrecy. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Michael's route took him past Chocolate Drop Mountain, a local landmark shrouded in its own set of rumors. Named for its distinctive shape, the mountain was said to hold abandoned mines and forgotten tunnels. Some whispered of strange lights seen on the mountain at night, unexplained noises, and a general sense of unease that clung to the area. He'd heard the stories, of course, but he'd always dismissed them as local folklore. He had packages to deliver, deadlines to meet, and college funds to save. Yet as he drove past the mountain, he couldn't help but feel a prickle of unease. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the landscape, and the mountain seemed to loom larger than usual. He glanced at the manifest, his brow furrowing. An address on his list seemed out of place. It was listed simply as Delivery Point Alpha with no name or specific location. He checked his map, but the address didn't correspond to any marked road or building. Curiosity piqued, Michael decided to call it in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, Michael speaking. I've got an address here that doesn't seem to exist. Delivery Point Alpha, Any chance you can give me some coordinates? The voice on the other end hesitated. Unit 12, stand by. The line went dead for a moment, replaced by static. Michael frowned, a knot of unease forming in his stomach. Something wasn't right. The static cleared and a different voice, colder and more official sounding, replaced the usual dispatcher. Unit 12, this is Control. Delivery point Alpha is a restricted location. Disregard the address and proceed to your next stop. Do not attempt to locate Delivery point Alpha. That concludes your transmission. The line went dead. Michael stared at the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. What was Delivery point Alpha? And why was it so secretive? He glanced back at Chocolate Drop Mountain, its silhouette now a dark, ominous shape against the dying light. Back at the warehouse, Andrew was finishing up his route, his mind already on the evening ahead. He was meeting his girlfriend, Sarah, for dinner, and he was looking forward to a few hours of normalcy. As he sorted through his remaining packages, a particular one caught his eye. It was addressed to a Mr. Smith, at an address he'd never seen before. The package was heavier than it looked, and a strange, metallic scent emanated from it. Curiosity got the better of him. He'd never opened a package before, knowing it was against the rules, but something about this one felt different. Hesitantly, he used his box cutter to slice through the tape. Inside, nestled in layers of packing peanuts, was a plain metal box. It was cold to the touch, and it hummed faintly. He carefully lifted the box out of the package, his heart pounding in his chest. What was it? And what was it doing being delivered by Global One? As he turned the box over in his hands, he noticed a small inscription on the bottom. It read, Project Nightingale. Project Nightingale. The name sent a chill down his spine. He'd heard whispers of it before, rumors of a secret government project involving mind control and surveillance. He'd always dismissed them as conspiracy theories, but now, holding this box in his hands, he wasn't so sure. He quickly repackaged the box, his hands shaking, and decided to tell Michael and the others about it later. They needed to figure out what they were involved in. The delivery job, once mundane and predictable, had taken on a sinister edge. And as the shadows grew longer, so did the feeling that they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The warehouse was eerily quiet. The usual cacophony of machinery and chatter had been replaced by an unsettling stillness. Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron huddled in their usual corner, their faces illuminated by the pale glow of a single light bulb. They spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with a mixture of fear and excitement. Michael recounted his encounter with Control, his voice tight with unease. He described the cryptic message, the feeling of being watched, and the unsettling presence of Chocolate Drop Mountain. Andrew listened intently, his gaze fixed on the metal box resting on the table between them. He'd decided to tell the others about his discovery, the weight of the secret too heavy to bear alone. Garrett, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a nervous energy, paced back and forth, his words tumbling over each other. Project Nightingale, mind control? This is crazy. We're delivery drivers, not secret agents. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes wide with disbelief. Aaron, usually the quietest of the group, surprised them all with his uncharacteristic intensity. But what if it's true? What if we're caught in something bigger than we ever imagined? A plan began to form, fueled by a shared sense of curiosity and a growing fear for their own safety. They would work together, share information, and try to piece together the puzzle of Delivery Point Alpha, Project Nightingale, and the secrets hidden beneath the surface of their ordinary lives. It was a risky decision, defying the orders of Control and delving deeper into a world they didn't understand. But they were in too deep now. They had glimpsed something dark and dangerous, and they couldn't turn back. The die was cast. Their lives, once predictable and mundane, had taken an irreversible turn. They were no longer just delivery drivers. They were hunters, seeking answers in a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Andrew carefully unwrapped the metal box, his movements precise and deliberate. The faint humming sound seemed to grow louder, vibrating against the table. Garrett, unable to contain his curiosity, leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. "What do you think it is?" he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Michael, ever the pragmatist, pulled out his pocket knife and began prying at the box's seams. "Only one way to find out," he muttered, his jaw set with determination. The box yielded with a metallic groan, revealing its contents. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, lay a device that seemed to defy explanation. It resembled a complex circuit board, its surface covered in intricate symbols and glowing diodes. Wires snaked out from its sides, connecting to a series of smaller, equally enigmatic components. The friends stared at the device in stunned silence, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. "What is that thing?" Aaron finally breathed, his voice barely a whisper. They'd expected something mundane, something that would explain its presence in their delivery system, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. It was alien, almost organic in its complexity, as if it were more than just a machine. It pulsed with an energy that seemed to hum beneath their fingertips, sending a shiver down their spines. The air in the room crackled with an unspoken tension, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that challenged their understanding of the world. And as they stared at the device, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer the hunters in this game of shadows. They were the hunted. The friends decided to keep the device's discovery a secret, at least for now. They carefully repackaged it, placing it back in the Global One packaging as if it were just another ordinary delivery. They agreed to meet later that night at their usual spot by the old abandoned quarry to discuss their next move. As they went their separate ways, a sense of unease clung to them like a shroud. The familiar streets seemed different now, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. Michael, driving his usual route, couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. He glanced nervously in his rearview mirror, but all he saw were the headlights of distant cars, their drivers anonymous in the fading light. He tried to convince himself it was just paranoia, but the feeling persisted, a gnawing anxiety that settled in the pit of his stomach. Andrew, usually calm and collected, found himself jumping at every unexpected noise. He walked with his head down, his gaze darting from side to side, as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. He couldn't escape the feeling that unseen eyes were watching his every move, judging his every decision. The metal box, now hidden beneath his bed, felt like a ticking time bomb, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. He had always been the voice of reason, the one who kept his friends grounded. But now, faced with the unexplainable, he felt a sense of dread he couldn't shake. The world, once familiar and predictable, had become a place of shadows and whispers, where nothing was as it seemed. Night had fallen, casting the abandoned quarry in an eerie, ethereal glow. The moon, a sliver of silver in the star-dusted sky, cast long, dancing shadows across the jagged rocks and stagnant pools of water. Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron huddled around a flickering fire, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. They spoke in hushed tones, their words lost to the wind that whistled through the quarry's crevices. "We need to find out what delivery point Alpha is," Michael said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "And we need to find out what that device is and what it has to do with Project Nightingale." Garrett, his usual bravado faltering in the face of the unknown, shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. "Maybe we should just forget about it," he mumbled, his gaze darting nervously towards the darkness that pressed in on all sides. "Maybe we should just pretend this never happened." Andrew, his face illuminated by the firelight, shook his head. "It's too late for that," he said, his voice low and steady. "We've seen too much. We can't just unsee it." Aaron, his eyes bright with a mixture of fear and determination, nodded in agreement. "We need to find out the truth," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "We owe it to ourselves and to anyone else who might be caught up in this." Their plan was simple, perhaps even reckless. They would follow Aaron on his next delivery to the naval base, staying close enough to observe but far enough to avoid suspicion. They hoped to catch a glimpse of where the package was being taken, to glean any clue that might lead them closer to the truth. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble in a game with stakes they were only beginning to understand. But as they sat there, united in their fear and their determination, they knew they had no other choice. They were in too deep now, bound together by a shared secret that threatened to unravel their lives. The following day, tension crackled in the air as Aaron prepared for his delivery run. He'd carefully concealed the metal box among a stack of mundane packages, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. His friends, their own faces etched with worry, watched from a distance, their presence a silent promise of support. They had agreed to maintain a low profile, their own delivery truck strategically parked several blocks away, their movements carefully choreographed to avoid detection. The naval base loomed large, its stark, imposing presence casting a long shadow over their clandestine operation. Aaron navigated the security checkpoint with practiced ease, his pulse quickening as the guard waved him through the gate. He parked his truck in the designated loading zone, his eyes scanning the area for anything out of the ordinary. His friends, their movements synchronized, pulled up at a nearby gas station, their gazes fixed on Aaron's truck. But as the hours ticked by, their hopes of uncovering the truth began to dwindle. Aaron made his deliveries, each one seemingly routine, each one failing to provide any clue as to the whereabouts of Delivery Point Alpha. The metal box, once a beacon of hope in their search for answers, now felt like a dead weight in his truck, a constant reminder of their growing frustration. As the sun began to set, casting long, ominous shadows across the base, a sense of defeat settled over the group. They had risked everything, only to hit a wall of silence and secrecy. They were no closer to understanding the truth than they had been before. And as they drove away from the naval base, the tail lights of their trucks disappearing into the gathering darkness, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had just been played. The following days were a blur of unease and suspicion. The weight of their secret, the knowledge of the strange device and the mysterious Delivery Point Alpha hung over the friends like a dark cloud. They went about their delivery routes with forced normalcy, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, their senses heightened to every unusual sound, every unfamiliar face. Sleep offered little respite, their nights plagued by unsettling dreams filled with cryptic symbols, shadowy figures, and a pervasive sense of dread. One evening, as Michael was locking up his apartment, he noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. It wasn't a familiar car, and it struck him as odd, out of place in his quiet neighborhood. He paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob, his gut instinct screaming at him to be cautious. He glanced back at the sedan, but the tinted windows obscured the driver's features. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone was waiting for him to make a move. Hesitantly, Michael stepped back into the shadows of his doorway, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched the sedan, his mind racing. Was it just a coincidence? Or was this connected to the strange events of the past few weeks? He couldn't be sure, but he knew he couldn't ignore his instincts. He had to be careful. He couldn't afford to take any chances. Meanwhile, Andrew was wrestling with his own demons. The metal box, still hidden beneath his bed, felt like a physical manifestation of his growing anxiety. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were in over their heads, that they had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. He spent hours online scouring the internet for any mention of Project Nightingale, Delivery Point Alpha, or any clue that might shed light on the mystery they were caught in. His searches led him down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, and whispered rumors of a hidden world operating just beneath the surface of their everyday lives. One night, he stumbled upon a blog post that sent a chill down his spine. It was written by a former government employee, a self-proclaimed whistleblower who claimed to have inside knowledge of a secret project involving mind control, surveillance, and advanced technology. The project's name, as fate would have it, was Nightingale. The whistleblower's words, filled with urgency and fear, painted a chilling picture of a government agency operating with impunity, using its vast resources and technological prowess to control and manipulate the population. The blog post, though lacking in concrete evidence, resonated with Andrew's own growing suspicions. He couldn't shake the feeling that this whistleblower, this lone voice crying out in the digital wilderness, held a piece of the puzzle they were desperately trying to solve. He printed out the blog post, his hands trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. He knew he had to show this to the others. It was a dangerous gamble, trusting the words of a stranger, but he couldn't ignore the possibility that this could be the break they needed. Garrett, always the skeptic, initially dismissed the blog post as the ramblings of a madman. But as they delved deeper into the whistleblower's claims, as they connected the dots between the blog post and their own experiences, a sense of unease began to creep into his usual jovial demeanor. The whistleblower's descriptions of the technology involved in Project Nightingale eerily mirrored the strange device they had discovered in the metal box. The blog post spoke of a network of hidden facilities, of secret deliveries made under the cover of darkness, of a shadowy organization known only as the Agency. Their investigation took them to the seedy underbelly of the city, to back alleys and abandoned warehouses, to clandestine meetings with sources shrouded in anonymity. They followed leads that often turned into dead ends, their hopes rising and falling with each passing day. They were in over their heads, out of their depth, but they couldn't turn back. They were driven by a shared sense of purpose, a desperate need to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Their pursuit of the truth became a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with unseen adversaries watching their every move. They found themselves followed, their phones tapped, their every move scrutinized. The line between reality and paranoia blurred, the weight of their secret threatening to crush them. Aaron, his youthful enthusiasm tempered by their harrowing experiences, proved to be a valuable asset in their investigation. His knowledge of the naval base, gleaned from his delivery runs, provided them with a crucial advantage. He remembered seeing a map displayed prominently in the base's main office that detailed the surrounding area, including the sprawling network of roads and tunnels that snaked through Chocolate Drop Mountain. He recalled overhearing a conversation between two officers, their words laced with an unsettling casualness, about a secure facility located deep within the mountain. They hadn't thought much of it at the time, dismissing it as just another example of military secrecy, but now these seemingly insignificant details took on a new, ominous significance. Armed with this newfound information, the friends turned their attention to Chocolate Drop Mountain. They spent hours studying maps, aerial photographs, and geological surveys, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance, a secret passage that might lead them to the heart of Project Nightingale. Their search led them to abandoned mine shafts, forgotten trails, and secluded valleys, their every step fraught with a sense of anticipation and dread. They discovered that Chocolate Drop Mountain was a place of hidden histories, of forgotten tragedies, and whispered legends. They learned of mining accidents that claimed the lives of countless workers. Their bodies never recovered, their souls said to wander the mountain's depths. They heard tales of strange lights seen on the mountain at night, of unexplained noises that echoed through the valleys, of a pervasive sense of unease that clung to the area. These stories, once dismissed as mere folklore, now took on a chilling reality, fueling their determination to uncover the truth. One evening, as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape, they stumbled upon a breakthrough. They had been following a narrow, overgrown trail, one that seemed to disappear into the mountainside, when they came across a small, almost unnoticeable clearing. It was eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. A sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air, a feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something significant. And then they saw it concealed amidst the trees, its entrance cleverly camouflaged by a tangle of vines and undergrowth, was a rusted metal door. It was almost invisible to the untrained eye, a testament to the meticulous efforts taken to conceal its existence. They approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth, their senses on high alert. The air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a feeling of both anticipation and dread. They had found their entrance, their gateway into the mountain's secrets. The question was, what awaited them on the other side? Michael, his hand trembling slightly, reached for the door's handle. It was cold to the touch, the metal rough and unforgiving beneath his fingers. He hesitated for a moment, a wave of apprehension washing over him. He glanced back at his friends, their faces illuminated by the fading light, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. They were in this together, for better or for worse. They had come too far to turn back now. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. It groaned in protest, the sound echoing through the clearing like a mournful cry. The air inside was stale and cold, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. A narrow passageway carved into the mountain's heart stretched out before them, disappearing into the darkness. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing off the damp stone walls, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder as they descended deeper into the mountain, the silence broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the rhythmic drip of water. The passageway twisted and turned, leading them ever downward, as if they were descending into the very bowels of the earth. After what felt like an eternity, the passageway opened up into a large cavernous chamber. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and a faint metallic tang. The chamber was dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. In the center of the chamber, surrounded by a labyrinth of wires, cables, and blinking lights, stood a massive metal structure. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. A grotesque fusion of technology and biology, its surface covered in pulsating veins and glowing orbs. As they approached the structure, their footsteps echoing ominously in the vast chamber, they noticed a series of metal tables arranged around its base. The tables were stained with a dark, viscous fluid, the air thick with the coppery scent of blood. Restraints designed to hold a human form were bolted to each table, their leather straps worn and frayed as if they had been used countless times before. A wave of nausea washed over Michael as the realization hit him. This wasn't a research facility, it was a torture chamber. And the chilling truth, the horrifying purpose of Project Nightingale, was about to be revealed. The cavernous chamber hummed with an unnatural energy, a low, throbbing pulse that vibrated in their teeth. Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron stood frozen, their flashlights casting dancing shadows on the monstrous metal structure. The air hung heavy, thick with the metallic scent of blood, and a chilling silence broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from the cavern ceiling. Aaron, his face ashen, was the first to break the silence. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's worse than we thought," Andrew murmured, his gaze fixed on the bloodstains marring the metal tables. "Much worse." Garrett, his usual bravado gone, swallowed hard. "Project Nightingale," he breathed, the words catching in his throat. "This is what they're hiding." Michael, his mind racing, scanned the chamber, searching for an answer, an escape, anything to break the spell of horror that held them captive. His gaze fell on a series of monitors, their screens dark, clustered near the base of the metal structure. "Let's see if we can find some answers," he muttered, his voice tight with a desperate hope. As Michael reached for the nearest monitor, a faint sound like a whisper on the wind reached their ears. It seemed to emanate from the heart of the structure, a low guttural moan that sent shivers down their spines. They exchanged uneasy glances, their blood turning to ice. The sound grew louder, evolving into a chorus of whispers, of pleas, of agonizing screams that echoed through the chamber, bouncing off the damp stone walls. Panic seized them. Andrew stumbled backward, knocking over a metal tray with a deafening clang. The whispers abruptly ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence even more terrifying than the sounds that preceded it. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the heart of the metal structure, bathing the chamber in an eerie, pulsating glow. The friends shielded their eyes, their hearts pounding against their ribs. As their vision adjusted, they saw a figure strapped to a metal table beneath the structure. A man, his body emaciated, his skin stretched taut over his bones, his eyes wide with a terrifying mixture of pain and fear. He thrashed against his restraints, his muffled screams echoing through the chamber. Tubes snaked from his body, connecting him to the metal structure like a macabre puppet to its master. Michael, his stomach churning, realized with a sickening certainty that the man wasn't screaming in protest, but in response to something far more sinister. He was being controlled, manipulated, his very essence being drained away by the monstrous machine. "We have to help him," Aaron whispered, his voice tight with a mix of horror and compassion. But even as he spoke, they all knew it was too late. The man's struggles were growing weaker, his screams fading into whimpers, his life force being slowly extinguished before their very eyes. The metal structure pulsed with a malevolent energy, its surface glowing with a sickening intensity. The friends watched in horrified fascination as the man's life force was drained away, absorbed by the machine, his tortured cries echoing in their ears long after he had fallen silent. The chamber, once filled with the man's tortured cries, now echoed with an oppressive silence. The metal structure, its thirst temporarily quenched, hummed with a low, satisfied purr. The friends, shaken to their core, stood frozen, their minds struggling to process the horrors they had witnessed. They had stumbled upon the truth behind Project Nightingale, but the reality was far more gruesome, far more depraved than they could have ever imagined. This wasn't just a government program, it was a monstrous experiment, a violation of the human soul. "We have to get out of here," Michael said, his voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and determination. "We have to tell someone what's happening here." But even as he spoke, he knew the futility of his words. Who would believe them? Who would dare challenge the power that lurked within these mountain depths? They were trapped, hunted, their every move monitored by unseen eyes. Their only hope lay in finding a way out of this subterranean nightmare and exposing the truth to a world that may not be ready to hear it. As they turned to leave, a flicker of movement on one of the monitors caught their eye. It was a security feed showing a long, sterile corridor lined with doors. A figure in a white lab coat walked briskly down the corridor, his face obscured by the shadows. He stopped at a door marked "Restricted Access" and punched in a code. The door slid open, revealing another corridor, this one darker, more sinister. The figure disappeared into the shadows, the door sliding shut behind him. A surge of adrenaline shot through Michael. Could this be their way out? Could this be their chance to escape this underground prison and expose the truth to the world? He pointed to the monitor, his voice urgent. "That corridor, the one marked "Restricted Access," it has to lead somewhere important. Maybe it's our way out." Andrew, his analytical mind already working, nodded in agreement. "It's a long shot, but it's our only shot. We have to try." Garrett, his usual bravado returning in the face of danger, cracked his knuckles. "Let's do this," he muttered, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. They moved quickly, their bodies tense, their senses on high alert. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder the deeper they went, the silence broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the distant hum of machinery. They reached the door marked "Restricted Access" and paused, their hearts pounding in their chests. Michael, his hand hovering over the keypad, looked back at his friends, their faces grim in the flickering light. "Ready?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. They nodded, their eyes locked on his. He took a deep breath and punched in the code he had memorized from the security feed. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a long, dark corridor that stretched out before them like a gaping maw. They moved cautiously down the corridor, their footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. The air was heavy with the scent of chemicals and a faint metallic tang that made their stomachs churn. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the walls lined with identical doors, each one a potential trap, a dead end. As they rounded a bend, they saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor. It was the man in the white lab coat from the security feed. He stood with his back to them, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He seemed to be talking to himself, his words a low, unintelligible murmur. Michael, his instincts screaming at him to be cautious, raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. They watched the man, their bodies tense, their minds racing. Who was he? And what was he doing down here? As they drew closer, they heard him muttering, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and despair. "They can't keep getting away with this," he whispered, his words barely audible. "Someone has to expose them for what they are." Michael's heart skipped a beat. Could this be their chance? Could this man be an ally? Someone who knew the truth about Project Nightingale and was willing to help them expose it? He stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "We can help you," he said, his voice low and steady. The man whirled around, his face contorted in a snarl. "You!" he hissed, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. "You're the ones who have been interfering with our work." He lunged at them, a syringe glinting in his hand. Michael reacted instinctively, shoving Garrett out of the way as the syringe whistled past his ear. The man, fueled by a desperate rage, pressed his attack, his movements swift and precise, his eyes cold and calculating. The friends, caught off guard, scrambled backward, their backs against the cold, unforgiving wall. The corridor, once a potential escape route, had become a trap, a cage from which there seemed to be no escape. Andrew, his mind racing, grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and hurled it at their attacker. The man, distracted, ducked just in time, the extinguisher clattering harmlessly against the wall behind him. "We don't want to hurt you," Michael said, his voice strained, his eyes darting around the corridor, searching for an escape route. "We just want to get out of here." The man laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the corridor. "You're in too deep now," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You've seen too much! You're never getting out of here alive!" He lunged again, his syringe aimed at Aaron, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror. Section 7. The escape. Time seemed to slow down. Michael, his instincts taking over, launched himself at the man, his shoulder connecting with his chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. The syringe clattered across the floor, spinning harmlessly to a stop at Andrew's feet. The friends wasted no time. They sprinted down the corridor, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite. They could hear the man's enraged shouts echoing behind them, but they didn't dare slow down, didn't dare look back. They burst through a door at the end of the corridor and found themselves in a vast, dimly lit warehouse. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched out before them, stacked high with crates and boxes, their contents unknown. The air was thick with dust and the musty odor of decay. They had escaped the corridors of Project Nightingale, but they were far from safe. They were lost in a labyrinth of shadows, hunted by an enemy they didn't understand, their only hope to find a way out before it was too late. As they ran, they could hear the distant sound of sirens, growing louder with each passing second. Their escape had been detected. The net was closing in. Section 1. Between the stacks. The warehouse echoed with the clang of metal on metal. Footsteps pounded behind them, heavy and relentless. Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron weaved through towering shelves, their path illuminated only by their wavering flashlights. Fear lent them speed, but their pursuers were relentless, their shadows stretching out like grasping claws in the flickering beams. "This way," Michael gasped, diving into a narrow aisle, crates stacked precariously on either side. The scent of mildew and dust filled his lungs, choking him. He could hear the others close behind, their ragged breaths echoing his own. "They're everywhere," Garrett cried, his voice high with panic. The beam of his flashlight danced wildly, illuminating nothing but the cold, metallic gleam of the shelves. They were running blind, their fear a living thing pulsing in their ears, urging them onward. "We have to lose them," Andrew gasped, his breath coming in short, painful bursts. "Find somewhere to hide." They were outmatched, outgunned, their hope dwindling with each passing second. The warehouse, once a potential escape route, now felt like a tomb, its towering shelves closing in on them, threatening to crush them. Section 2. False Hope. A glimmer of light appeared at the end of the aisle. A doorway, partially obscured by a tangle of wires and cables, beckoned them forward. Michael, his heart pounding against his ribs, surged ahead, hope flaring like a match in the darkness. "There!" he shouted, pointing toward the doorway. They stumbled through, their lungs burning, their legs heavy with fatigue. The room beyond was small, cramped, filled with the low hum of machinery. A single bare bulb cast a sickly yellow glow on the dusty equipment and grime-coated walls. A wave of despair washed over Michael. It was a dead end, a maintenance closet, forgotten and unused. There was nowhere left to run. He leaned against the wall, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning their surroundings, searching for another way out, a miracle. "We're trapped," Garrett whispered, his voice hollow with defeat. He sank to the floor, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. They were cornered, their pursuers closing in, their escape route a cruel illusion. The weight of their situation, the knowledge of the horrors they had witnessed, pressed down on them, threatening to suffocate them. Andrew, his gaze fixed on the far wall, straightened, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "Wait," he said, his voice tight with a desperate urgency. "There's something back here." He stumbled toward a section of the wall that seemed darker than the rest, his hand reaching out, his fingers brushing against rough-hewn stone. "What is it?" Aaron whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his own heart. They crowded around Andrew, their flashlights converging on the spot where he stood, their beams revealing a narrow opening in the wall, concealed behind a tangle of wires and pipes. It was a tunnel, its entrance crudely hewn from the rock, its edges rough and unforgiving. A cold, damp breeze wafted from its depths, carrying with it the scent of earth and something else, something ancient and unsettling. It was a way out, but not one they had anticipated, a path shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. "Where does it lead?" Garrett asked, his voice a mix of fear and hope. No one had an answer. The tunnel, a silent invitation into the unknown, beckoned them forward, offering the promise of escape and the threat of something far more sinister. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. They moved single file, their bodies hunched, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder the deeper they went, the silence broken only by the sound of their ragged breaths and the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water from the unseen ceiling. Michael, at the head of their ragtag procession, felt a growing sense of unease. The tunnel, far from leading them to safety, seemed to be drawing them deeper into the mountain's heart, towards something ancient and malevolent. He could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on him, the very rock around them seeming to pulse with a life of its own. "How much further?" Aaron whispered, his voice tight with fear. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, a dark and winding labyrinth with no end in sight. They had taken a gamble, a desperate bid for freedom, but their hope was fading, replaced by a chilling certainty that they had only stumbled deeper into their nightmare. "I don't know," Michael muttered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his own heart. He pushed on, driven by a desperate hope, his flashlight beam dancing wildly over the tunnel walls, searching for an exit, a sign, anything to break the oppressive darkness. The tunnel opened into a cavern so vast it stole their breath. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and a low, throbbing hum that vibrated in their teeth. Their flashlights, inadequate in the face of such immensity, danced over towering walls of jagged rock, revealing glimpses of grotesque carvings, ancient symbols etched into the stone by hands long gone. In the center of the cavern, bathed in an eerie, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from the very rock itself, stood a structure that defied description. It was a fusion of nature and technology, of metal and stone, of flesh and wire, a monstrous entity that seemed to writhe and pulse with a life of its own. "What is that?" Garrett breathed, his voice barely a whisper in the cavern's echoing expanse. The structure, a grotesque parody of creation, seemed to pulse in time with their racing hearts, its very presence, a violation of nature, of sanity, of the natural order of things. "This is bigger than Project Nightingale," Andrew murmured, his voice tight with a dawning horror. "This is something else entirely." The cavern, a testament to an ancient power, held them captive, its very air heavy with a sense of dread, a premonition of something terrible about to unfold. They were surrounded. Figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by hoods, their bodies clad in dark, nondescript clothing. They moved with a practiced precision, their hands resting on weapons that glinted coldly in the cavern's eerie light. Escape, once a desperate hope, now seemed like a cruel joke. "Don't move," a voice boomed through the cavern, amplified by the echoing expanse. "You've seen too much." Michael, his mind racing, exchanged glances with his friends, their faces pale masks of fear and resignation in the flickering light. They were outmatched, outgunned, their fate sealed the moment they stumbled into this forgotten place. "Who are you?" Michael shouted, his voice echoing through the cavern, a futile challenge in the face of such overwhelming power. The figures remained silent, their gazes unwavering, their presence a suffocating weight on their chests. The structure at the cavern's heart pulsed with a malevolent energy, its low hum vibrating through the air, through their very bones, a symphony of power and madness. "It doesn't matter," a voice whispered from the shadows, a voice both ancient and chillingly familiar. "You were never meant to leave." Despair, cold and final, settled over them. They had stumbled upon a truth too terrible to comprehend, a power too vast to challenge. Their journey, their pursuit of the truth, had led them to this, a dead end in the heart of the mountain. Their lives forfeit to a darkness older than time itself. Section 7, Dawn Breaks. Michael woke to the blinding sting of sunlight in his eyes. He was lying on the hard asphalt of the Global One Logistics parking lot, his body aching, his mind still reeling from the nightmare he had barely escaped. He sat up, his gaze sweeping over his surroundings, his heart pounding against his ribs. His delivery truck stood nearby, its side dented, its paint scratched, as if it had been in a struggle. Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron were stirring nearby, their faces etched with the same mixture of confusion and relief that he felt. They had no memory of how they had gotten back, no explanation for the gaping holes in their recollection of the past few days. The events in the cavern, the monstrous structure, the hooded figures, it all felt like a fever dream, a terrifying hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. As they stumbled to their feet, their bodies stiff and sore, they exchanged uneasy glances, a silent question hanging heavy in the air. Had it all been real? Or had they simply been pawns in a game they didn't understand, their minds manipulated, their memories erased? The rising sun, a beacon of normalcy in a world suddenly uncertain, offered no answers. Life went on, their deliveries resumed, but a shadow lingered, a nagging doubt that gnawed at the edges of their thoughts. The secrets remained buried, the truth hidden beneath a veil of normalcy that felt fragile, easily shattered. They were left with a chilling certainty. Some things are best left undisturbed, some truths too terrible to face. And as they went about their work, the weight of the unknown pressed down on them, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their everyday lives. The Global One Logistics warehouse hummed with a forced normalcy. Forklifts buzzed, conveyor belts groaned, and the air throbbed with the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. Yet for Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron, the familiar cacophony held a sinister undertone, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their everyday lives. They went through the motions of their jobs, their movements mechanical, their laughter hollow. The camaraderie they once shared had been fractured, replaced by a silent tension that hung heavy in the air. The events at Chocolate Drop Mountain, though fragmented and dreamlike in their memories, cast a long shadow over their lives. They had glimpses, flashes of terrifying clarity of the monstrous structure, the hooded figures, the chilling whispers that echoed in the cavern's depths. But the more they tried to grasp the truth, the more it slipped through their fingers, leaving them with a gnawing sense of unease, a chilling certainty that they had only scratched the surface of something vast and sinister. They tried to move on, to convince themselves that it had all been a bad dream, a collective hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But the nightmares persisted, their sleep haunted by cryptic symbols, shadowy figures, and the chilling hum of machinery. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, their grasp on sanity as fragile as a spider's thread. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The packages they delivered, once mundane symbols of commerce, now seemed weighted with hidden meanings, potential clues to a mystery they were no closer to solving. They had tried to tell their story, to confide in someone, anyone who might believe them, who might help them make sense of the chaos that had invaded their lives. But their words, when spoken aloud, sounded hollow, unbelievable, even to their own ears. Who would believe the ramblings of 4 delivery drivers about ancient caverns, monstrous machines, and government conspiracies? They were met with skepticism, pity, and a chilling indifference that cut them to the core. The world, it seemed, was content to avert its gaze, to cling to a comforting illusion of normalcy, even as darkness festered beneath the surface. So they retreated into a silent pact, their shared trauma a bond that both united and isolated them. They didn't speak of Chocolate Drop Mountain, of the horrors they had witnessed, of the questions that gnawed at their souls. To speak of it, they knew, was to risk unraveling the fragile threads of their sanity, to invite the darkness back into their lives. But silence came at a price. The easy camaraderie they once shared was gone, replaced by a strained politeness, a careful avoidance of any topic that might shatter the fragile peace they had constructed. They drifted apart, their friendships eroded by suspicion, fear, and the unspoken knowledge that they had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. Michael, once the group's de facto leader, withdrew into himself, his dreams of college replaced by a dull ache of despair. Andrew, his analytical mind overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had witnessed, buried himself in his work, seeking solace in the mundane. Garrett, his usual humor silenced by a bone-deep fear, became a shadow of his former self, and Aaron, the youngest and most vulnerable, retreated into a world of video games and fantasy, seeking escape from a reality too terrible to face. Chocolate Drop Mountain, a silent sentinel on the horizon, loomed over their lives, a constant reminder of the secrets it held, the lives it had irrevocably altered. The rumors persisted, whispered tales of strange lights, unexplained disappearances, and a pervasive sense of unease that clung to the area. But the authorities remained silent, their investigations, if any were ever conducted, yielding no answers, no explanations. The world moved on, oblivious to the darkness that festered beneath the surface. The packages were delivered, the quotas met, the wheels of commerce grinding relentlessly onward. But for Michael, Andrew, Garrett, and Aaron, the world would never be the same. They were left with a chilling certainty. Some truths are too terrible to face, some secrets too dangerous to uncover. Their lives, once ordinary, had been touched by something extraordinary, something that defied explanation, something that challenged their very understanding of the world. And as they went about their days, haunted by the shadows of their past, they carried a heavy truth. The world is not as it seems, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. The silence of Chocolate Drop Mountain was not a comfort, but a chilling testament to the enduring power of secrets and the devastating consequences of seeking answers in a world determined to look away.